The house was unusually quiet that Saturday afternoon, the kind of stillness that felt almost like a gift. Sunlight streamed lazily through the curtains, painting soft patterns across the living room floor. It was one of those rare moments when everything seemed perfectly in place. My husband, Robert, had left early for his usual weekend golf game, cheerful and unbothered as always. His routine rarely changed, and Liam, his son, was supposed to be out with friends. That left me alone, wrapped in a calm I hadn't realized I needed. I curled up on the sofa with a book, letting the silence settle into me. For a while it was perfect, just the turning of pages, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, and the distant sounds of the neighborhood. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, a dull, rhythmic thumping from upstairs. I paused, listening. Maybe I imagined it, but then it came again, clearer this time. A creak, a soft, muffled sound. I frowned. Liam wasn't supposed to be home. A flicker of annoyance stirred. Maybe he'd come back early and brought someone with him. Teenagers weren't exactly known for being quiet. Still, something about the sound didn't quite fit. It wasn't laughter or music or a video game blasting at full volume. It was different. Curiosity got the better of me. I set my book aside and stood, moving slowly toward the staircase. Each step creaked faintly beneath my weight as I made my way up. The sounds grew more distinct with every step, rhythmic, uneven, accompanied by soft, strained noises that made something in my chest tighten with unease. When I reached the hallway, I noticed Liam's door. It was slightly open. That alone was strange. Liam valued his privacy more than anything. His door was almost always shut tight, like a barrier between his world and the rest of the house. I hesitated. Maybe I should turn back. Maybe this was something I wasn't meant to interrupt. But then another sound slipped through the crack in the door, sharper this time. Unmistakable. It rooted me in place. My hand hovered near the doorknob. Just a quick look, I told myself. Just to make sure everything was okay. I nudged the door open slightly and peeked inside. What I saw made my breath catch. Liam was on his bed, his back turned toward the door. His posture was tense, his movements hurried and private. It took only a second to understand what was happening. I froze. Heat rushed to my face as realization settled in. This wasn't noise from a game or a friend visiting. This was something deeply personal, something I had no right to witness. I immediately felt like I had crossed a line. A deep wave of embarrassment washed over me, on his behalf and my own. I should leave. I should pretend this never happened. But for a brief moment I didn't move, because what I saw wasn't just awkward, it was human. Liam wasn't a child anymore. That truth hit me harder than anything else. Somewhere along the way, the quiet, withdrawn teenager had become a young man. And standing there uninvited, I was confronted with that reality in the most unexpected way. I stepped back quickly, my heart racing. This was a mistake. I turned to leave, desperate to put distance between myself and that moment. But as I moved, my foot caught on the edge of the hallway rug. I stumbled. A small yelp escaped me before I could stop it. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the silent house. I froze. For a split second, everything went still. Then the noise from inside the room stopped abruptly. Silence. Heavy, knowing silence. My stomach dropped. He heard me. A moment later, his voice came through the door, uncertain, cautious. "Mom?" The word hit harder than I expected. There was no escaping now. I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself, then turned back toward the door. Every instinct told me to walk away, to pretend nothing had happened. But that would only make things worse. Taking a slow breath, I pushed the door open. Liam was sitting up now, the blanket pulled tightly around him. His face was flushed, his hair messy. His expression a mixture of shock and pure embarrassment. He avoided my eyes at first, staring somewhere past me, as if that might make the situation less real. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt thick, heavy with everything unspoken. I'm sorry, I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. I didn't mean to come in. I heard something and I thought. I stopped. There was no explanation that wouldn't sound ridiculous. He nodded slightly, still not looking at me. "It's okay," he muttered, though it clearly wasn't. Another silence followed, even more uncomfortable than the first. I could have left right then. That would have been the easiest option. But something held me there. Maybe it was the look on his face. He wasn't just embarrassed, he looked exposed, vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. And beneath that embarrassment, there was something else. Fear, maybe. or uncertainty. It softened something in me. Liam, I said gently, stepping just inside the room. You don't have to feel ashamed. His head lifted slightly, surprise flickering in his eyes. It's normal, I continued, choosing my words carefully. Everyone goes through things like this. It's part of growing up. He swallowed, still clearly uncomfortable, but he was listening. You're not in trouble, I added. That seemed to reach him. Some of the tension in his shoulders eased, just a little. Okay, he said quietly. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping a respectful distance. I really didn't mean to intrude, I said again. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. He nodded, glancing at me briefly before looking away again. I'm fine, he said. Another pause. Then, after a moment, he spoke again, hesitant this time. You won't tell Dad, right? The question caught me off guard, but I answered immediately. No, I said firmly. Of course not. Relief flickered across his face. This stays between us, I added. He exhaled slowly, some of the tension finally leaving him. Thanks, he murmured. I offered a small, reassuring smile. Look, I said gently, if you ever feel confused about anything, or just need to talk, you can come to me. No judgment. He looked at me then, really looked this time. And for the first time since I walked in, the moment didn't feel entirely uncomfortable. It felt human, messy, awkward, but real. Okay, he said softly. I gave a small nod, then stepped back toward the door. I'll give you some space, I said. He nodded again. As I turned and walked out, closing the door quietly behind me, my heart was still racing, but for reasons I couldn't quite explain. The house was quiet again, but something had changed. Something subtle, something unspoken. And I had a feeling that quiet wouldn't feel the same anymore. The house didn't feel the same anymore. Nothing had changed on the surface. The furniture was in the same place. The walls still held the same family photos. And the quiet hum of daily life continued, as it always had. But beneath that normalcy, something had shifted, something subtle, yet impossible to ignore. I felt it the moment I stepped back into the living room after leaving Liam's door. I picked up my book again, trying to return to where I had left off. But the words blurred together. My mind refused to settle. Every sentence slipped away before I could process it. With a quiet sigh, I set the book down. What had just happened replayed in my head. Not in detail, but in feeling, the awkwardness, the vulnerability, the look on Liam's face. It lingered. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It was a normal situation. Uncomfortable, yes, but natural. Something parents, or in my case, step-parents, eventually encounter in one way or another. So why did it feel like more? I leaned back against the sofa, staring at the ceiling. The silence pressed in again, but now it felt heavier. Upstairs, everything had gone quiet. I wondered what Liam was thinking. Embarrassed, obviously. Maybe even avoiding me now. That would be understandable. Teenagers, no young adults, valued their privacy fiercely. And I had just walked straight into one of the most private moments imaginable. A wave of guilt washed over me. I should have knocked. I should have turned away. I should have respected that boundary, but intentions didn't change what happened. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. I kept busy where I could, straightening up the kitchen, folding laundry that didn't really need folding, pacing from one room to another without purpose, anything to distract myself. But every now and then, my eyes drifted toward the staircase. Eventually, I heard a door open upstairs. My body tensed slightly. Footsteps followed, careful, measured, almost hesitant. Then Liam appeared at the bottom of the stairs. For a brief moment, we both froze. It was like stepping into the same room after an argument that had never actually been spoken aloud. Hey, I said gently, trying to keep my tone as normal as possible. Hey, he replied. His voice was steady, but his posture gave him away. There was a stiffness to him, a kind of uncertainty in the way he stood there, as if unsure what version of this moment he was supposed to play. I offered a small smile. You okay? I asked. He nodded quickly. Yeah, I'm good. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just a little too long. I was just going to get something to eat, he added, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. Of course, I said, stepping slightly aside. Go ahead. He moved past me, keeping a careful distance, like we were both instinctively respecting an invisible line that hadn't been there before. I watched him quietly as he opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, then leaned against the counter. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, unexpectedly, he broke the silence. Thanks for earlier. I blinked, slightly surprised. For what? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. For not making it weird, he said, his voice quieter now. I let out a soft breath. I'm pretty sure it was already weird, I replied lightly. A faint, almost reluctant smile appeared on his face. Yeah, I guess. That small shift eased something between us. Liam, I said after a moment, choosing my words carefully, you don't have to feel uncomfortable around me. He looked down at the bottle in his hands. I know, it's just awkward. That's fair, I admitted. It's awkward for both of us. He nodded. Another pause. Then he glanced up at me again. But you meant what you said, right? He asked. About it being normal? Yes, I said without hesitation. I did. He seemed to think about that. I didn't really have anyone to talk to about stuff like that, he admitted quietly. Dad doesn't exactly talk about anything like that. I wasn't surprised. Robert had always been more reserved when it came to emotional or personal conversations. It wasn't neglect, just distance. A kind of quiet disconnect. Well, I said gently, you're not alone in that. He looked at me again, more directly this time. And you can talk to me, I added. About anything. No judgment. There was sincerity in my voice, and I made sure he could hear it. He nodded slowly. Okay. That word felt different this time. Less uncertain, more accepting. I leaned lightly against the counter across from him, keeping the space between us comfortable. Growing up is confusing, I said. There's a lot no one really explains properly. He let out a quiet breath, almost like a small laugh. Yeah, that's one way to put it. But you figure it out, I continued. Piece by piece. And it's okay not to have all the answers right away. He seemed to absorb that. For the first time since earlier, his shoulders relaxed fully. Thanks, he said again, more naturally now. You don't have to thank me, I replied. I do, he said. Most people would have just freaked out. I smiled faintly. Well, I'm not most people. That earned a slightly bigger smile from him. The tension that had filled the house earlier had softened, replaced by something quieter, something more grounded. Not gone, but manageable. After a moment, he straightened up. I should probably go finish what I was doing, he said, then immediately winced at his own choice of words. I couldn't help it. I laughed softly. Maybe choose a different sentence next time, I teased gently. He groaned, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, that sounded bad. It's okay, I said, still smiling. We'll both survive this. He nodded, a little embarrassed, but no longer overwhelmed. Yeah, we will. As he turned to head back upstairs, he paused for just a second. Hey, he said, glancing back at me. Really, thanks. I gave him a small nod. Anytime. He disappeared up the stairs, his steps lighter than before. I remained in the kitchen for a while after that, leaning against the counter in quiet thought. The situation hadn't disappeared. It hadn't been erased or forgotten, but it had changed. What started as an uncomfortable accident had turned into something else. Entirely, not inappropriate, not dangerous, but meaningful in a different way. A moment of trust, of understanding, of stepping into a role that required patience, care, and boundaries. I exhaled slowly. This was where it mattered. Not the mistake, but what came after it. And as the house settled back into its quiet rhythm, I realized something important. The line hadn't been crossed. It had been seen. And now, it was my responsibility to make sure it stayed exactly where it belonged. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. But it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not empty, not distant. Aware, there was a new understanding in the house now. Something unspoken but present in the way Liam and I moved around each other. It wasn't awkward in the same sharp, suffocating way as that first afternoon. Instead, it felt careful, intentional. We were both adjusting. Robert, as always, remained unchanged. He came and went with his usual routines, unaware of the shift that had taken place in his own home. Dinner conversations were the same, light, practical, sometimes distracted. He talked about golf, work, small annoyances. Liam nodded when expected. I listened, responded, filled the silence where needed. From the outside, nothing had changed, but underneath, something had matured. A few days after the incident, I found Liam in the kitchen again, this time late in the evening. Robert had already gone to bed, and the house had fallen into its familiar nighttime stillness. Liam stood by the counter, scrolling on his phone, a half-empty glass of water beside him. He looked up when I entered. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied, moving toward the sink. There was no tension in the greeting this time. Just normal. Or at least a new version of normal. "You're up late," I said casually. "Couldn't sleep," he shrugged. I nodded, rinsing a glass slowly. For a moment we existed in comfortable silence. Then he spoke again. "I've been thinking." I glanced at him, sensing something more serious in his tone. "About what?" He hesitated briefly, then met my eyes. "About the other day." I set the glass down gently. "Okay," I said, giving him space to continue. "I was really embarrassed at first," he admitted. "Like, really embarrassed." "That makes sense," I said softly. "But after," he continued, "I don't know. It felt different." "Different how?" He searched for the right words. Like, it wasn't just about being embarrassed anymore. It was more like, I realized I didn't have to feel ashamed. I felt a quiet sense of relief hearing that. "That's important," I said. "There's a difference between privacy and shame. Everyone deserves privacy, but no one deserves to feel ashamed for something natural." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think that's what I needed to hear." There was a pause. Then he added more quietly, "I wish Dad could talk about stuff like that." I leaned lightly against the counter. "He probably doesn't know how," I said honestly. "Some people were never taught how to have those conversations." "Yeah," Liam said. "I guess." Another small silence followed, but this one felt thoughtful rather than heavy. "I'm glad you didn't freak out," he said after a moment. I smiled faintly. "I'm glad you talked to me about it." He looked at me then, more openly than before. I trust you more now." The words were simple, but they carried weight. I took a slow breath. "Trust goes both ways," I said gently. "And it comes with responsibility." He frowned, slightly curious. "What do you mean?" "It means," I explained, "that when something uncomfortable happens, like the other day, we have a choice. We can let it become something confusing, or we can handle it in a way that keeps things safe, respectful, and clear." He listened carefully. "I want you to feel like you can talk to me," I continued. "But I also want to make sure we keep healthy boundaries. That's what makes trust strong, not complicated." He nodded, understanding settling in. "Yeah, that makes sense." There was no resistance in his voice, just acceptance. "And if you ever have questions," I added, "or feel unsure about something, I'll help you find the right answers, but in the right way." He gave a small, genuine smile. "Okay." Something about that moment felt important. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just solid, a foundation being set. Over the next few weeks, that foundation held. Our interactions became easier, more natural. The awkwardness faded into something distant, replaced by a quiet mutual respect. There were still moments of hesitation now and then. A glance held a second too long. A conversation that almost went somewhere deeper. But each time, we both seemed to recognize it and step back, not out of fear, but out of understanding. One afternoon, I found Liam sitting at the dining table with his laptop, clearly frustrated. "Everything okay?" I asked. He sighed. "Just stuck on this assignment." I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "Let me see." We spent the next hour going through it together, talking, explaining, occasionally laughing when something didn't make sense. It was simple, ordinary, but meaningful. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're actually really easy to talk to." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually?" He smirked. "Okay, that came out wrong." I laughed softly. "I'll take it anyway." Moments like that became more common. Not intense, not confusing, just real. And in those moments, I realized something important. What had happened that day upstairs could have gone in a very different direction. It could have created distance, discomfort, even damage. But it didn't. Because we chose differently. One evening as we sat at the dinner table together, Robert glanced between us. "You two seem to be getting along well lately," he said. Liam and I exchanged a quick look. "Yeah," Liam said simply. "We are." I smiled but didn't add anything. Some things didn't need to be explained. Later that night, as I stood by the window in the quiet living room, I thought back to that Saturday afternoon. The silence. The mistake. The moment that could have shifted everything. Instead, it became something else. A reminder that being present matters. That reacting with understanding matters. That boundaries, clear, firm, respected, are what turn difficult moments into meaningful ones. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Liam paused near the hallway. "Good night," he said. "Good night," I replied. There was nothing complicated in the exchange. No tension, no unspoken weight, just calm. And as the house settled into sleep once more, I realized that the quiet had returned, not the same as before, but better, stronger, because now it wasn't just silence. It was trust, clear, steady, and exactly where it belonged.